Welcome to Parev TV. Joining us from Yerevan, Armenia is Dr. Vahram Matevosyan, Political Science and International Affairs Program Chair at the American University of Armenia, the AUA, and also a Senior Research Fellow at the Institute of Oriental Studies of the National Academy of Sciences. Dr. Matevosyan, thank you for joining us. It is really a great honor to have a chance to talk to you. We in the West, we in America are following the news, the developments in Ukraine. War brings with it devastation, destruction, despair, a lot of tragedy. We also, as we watch the developments in Ukraine, we also think of the 44-day war in Armenia. We cannot help but draw comparisons between how this war is being covered and Armenia in Karabakh, the 44-day war was covered. But what is your take of the whole situation and how can this affect Armenia?
Well, thank you very much, Vahram, for this opportunity. This is the third time we're doing an interview, and I'll be glad to share my insights about this very tumultuous processes that we are all observing. So the way I see this war and what we observed in our country, there are stark differences, and the difference, the first obvious difference is the way the war and the aggression are treated by the so-called international community, collective West, if we can use that word. In the case of the Karabakh war, there was not a single country which would condemn the Azerbaijani aggression against Karabakh and Armenia. There were some organizations which were vocal condemning Azerbaijan, but they remained quite marginal. All in all, the entire world sided with Azerbaijan, or at least they decided not to be vocal about the Azerbaijani aggression, not to do one-sided statements condemning Azerbaijan's military aggression against Artsakh and Armenia, which was in violation of international law and the spirit of negotiations that were going on for many years. And they just went ahead and carried out a number of crimes against Artsakh and Armenia. So there was there was also an information warfare with all its manifestations that we all observed and experienced in 2020. And to some extent, on many levels, Armenia had to cope with Azerbaijani information warfare also all alone. So Armenia and Artsakh was left alone back in 2020. We here see that that Ukraine is having the support of the entire world. I mean, countries that I guess even never heard of Ukraine started to claim that they are strongly support Ukraine's aggression. So aggression against Ukraine. So they unanimously started to oppose Russia, and understandably, people start to question the rationality of the thinking and how the interests are presented and promoted by leading international actors. And from that perspective, we see the hypocrisy of the international community, different priorities. Depending on the conditions and pursued interests. Well, nobody's naive to think that the West likes Ukrainians. That's why Ukrainians are sort of in the headlines. No, there's nothing personal. It's realpolitik, and the idea is to they have touched the nerve of the Russians, and Russians. I guess they did a strategic miscalculation. They failed to convince the world, the expediency and the rationale behind their move. The entire world is still puzzled by this move of Vladimir Putin, and it just indicates how fragile is a world order. At least it has become since February 24th. So yes, the stakes are high in Ukraine, and the information warfare that we're all observing, I guess we have all seen this 2 years ago in Armenia. To some observers, they may sound a little bit inhumane, not little bit, I take it back, I mean, completely inhumane. But we all saw this. I mean, if you don't stop the war aggression, solving the problems through military means, then you get what you were not prepared for, or you were preparing for. So I think there are serious questions, and the new stories that are still emerging from Armenia and from Artsakh, that we hear how the war was handled, how different information operations were carried out in Armenia. We see these kind of things happening now in Ukraine. So there are many parallels that I see, but they also see some new developments and operations that the West and Ukrainians are carrying out against Russians.
You know, we have quite a few Armenians in Ukraine. I don't have the right number, maybe 500,000. You may correct me. And we have 2.5 million Armenians in Russia. And many of these families working in Russia support Armenian families in Armenia. And when the ruble gets devalued and other economic problems arise, how has this changed Armenian life in Armenia?
When the February 14th erupted, again, that military conflict caught us unprepared. All of a sudden, the government and the public civil society organizations started to talk about Armenians, or what's going to happen to Armenians in Ukraine, what we can do. And it just once again underlines the importance of having this very vague idea about Armenians living outside of Armenia, especially in the post-Soviet space. You're completely right there. I mean, if we believe Putin in 2015, he said there are 3 million Armenians living in Russia. According to different numbers, the number of Armenians in Ukraine varies from 400,000 to 500,000. So your estimations are correct. But what is more concerning is the current situation with Armenians living in Ukraine. And you mentioned that many Armenians from Russia sending money to Armenia, remittances were also coming from Ukraine, especially in the eastern part of Ukraine, which became the scene for this military campaign. Many Armenians used to live in the eastern part, in Kharkov, in Donetsk, in Lugansk, in Odessa, in Kiev. What is also interesting, that Ukraine is one of the rare countries in the world that Armenia has 4 general consulates before the war, and that indicates that Armenia attached important attention to high importance to Armenians living in Ukraine. So of course there are some rumors that some of these consulates were given because of some corrupt practices. I don't know how accurate are these rumors, but all in all, there have been 4 consulates, so one in Odessa, Kharkov, Cherkasy, and in Ternopil. Now the situation with Armenians is really concerning everyone. There are mixed marriages, there are mixed families, so that one Armenian, one Ukrainian. So we hear these stories coming up, but what is more striking to me is how unprepared was the government and the Armenian embassy in Ukraine, that all of a sudden they just discovered that the war has started. There have been a number of critical reports about the activities of the Armenian embassy in Kiev. so the foreign minister last week mentioned in the parliament that the embassy received 1,600 phone calls only. And he also admitted that the volume of phone calls is so big that human capacity doesn't allow to manage. I understand that, but it was not something unprepared, right? It was something that was coming. And especially if almost half of this population in Ukraine, 250,000 of they're Armenian citizens. They have dual citizenship, let's say. But there's some work should have been done to prepare the exit of Armenians from Ukraine. So once again, a conflict erupts, an Armenian government is caught unprepared. The same happened in Iraq. The same happened in Syria. The same happened now is happening in Ukraine. So we need to have this a strategy in place, what to do in this kind of circumstances. And now what is also how the war is also affecting Armenia. Many Armenians or even Ukrainians, ethnic Ukrainians or Russians are coming to Armenia. We see in the streets of Yerevan many Russians, many Ukrainians, Belarusians who are coming to Armenia just to see when the situation comes down. Actually, the hotels in Yerevan are overbooked, really? As a matter of fact. And we also see here in the banks that there are some transactions in the banking system that are going on currently. So we don't know. This is all temporary. But what I don't hear much is about the Armenians returning to Armenia, or they are having difficulties returning to Armenia. So I understand it's a crisis. It's a humanitarian crisis. It's tragedy. It's calamitous. But on the other hand, the government's job is to take care of its citizens, no matter where they are, no matter under what circumstances they are. So I hope that the priorities will dominate, and the government of the country will be able to take over this situation and try to set the priorities, if needed, negotiate with the Russian side, with the Ukrainian side, so that Armenians can have a safe exit, and they could go to safe places, and their security will be guaranteed.
You know, it seems all the post-Soviet states are going through similar experiences. And what do you foresee? Is there a new world structure taking place? Is Armenia going to be part of Russia? Is Putin wants all the Soviets back to Russia? What is the end game, if I may ask, as a last question?
And of course, it's a tremendously difficult question, but because Putin changed the paradigm, the world order that was set more or less clear after 1991 has started to evolve dramatically, so fast and in so many different places simultaneously in parallel that sometimes we are having difficulty to rationalize and to put it into one framework. The same is happening currently with the post-Soviet space. Look, what is important to know that Russia's radical decision is also a manifestation of Russia's changing strategic perception of the post-Soviet space. It comes without saying that Russia has always perceived the post-Soviet space it's strategic, it's near abroad, or its backyard. Now, Russia saw that the West is not keeping its word about not extending towards the east of NATO, and NATO keeps expanding. I think what is happening that Russia is becoming more and more, and Russia is transforming from defensive to offensive strategy. And if we look at the numbers, if I put together these numbers from 2008 to 2022, until the morning of February 14th, Russian military forces has have expanded up to 64,000 square kilometers. That's a territory of entire Lithuania. And of course, now their intention is to also control the entire Donbas region, which will add another 52,000 square kilometers. So Russian military is positioned in Georgia, in two breakaway regions of Georgia, in Moldova, in Crimea, and in Nagorno-Karabakh. So Russia is expanding its military trajectory and at the expense of geopolitics, at the expense of realpolitik. And Russia, I guess, it's overstretched, if you ask me. Russian toolbox is rather limited. Russia only speaks about gas and military weapons. So that's the biggest problem. And where does Armenia fit into this? Currently, with its after defeat and after all the tragic developments, post-war developments still going on, these developments, it's Armenia perhaps subconsciously continues with Russia. However, on the long-term developments, how is this going to play out? It remains a big question, because now Armenian government has been able to take a sort of neutral position, has been able to support diplomatically Russia for the last few days in the Council of Europe and in the UN. But overall, Armenia's position is not to be vocal, not to take sides. And it's, for a country like Armenia with its limited resources, this may be perhaps the smartest decision for now, but Armenian government should take care of its citizens first, make sure that they are in safe locations and the security is provided.
Dr. Matevosyan, we thank you very much for your insightful comments, and we hope to have a chance to talk to you again in the near future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this opportunity.